It took me a year to get over someone I never even met. He sent me an Alice in Wonderland GIF on February 28th, 2020. I remember because it was my last normal weekend before COVID hit South Africa, where I was living at the time. Within 5 messages of our Tinder match, I discovered that I had a lot in common with this person who I call Max, pseudonym. I discovered we had studied at the same university previously. We even completed the same degree. Within a few messages, we were exchanging our writing. Instead of working on my deadlines, I was staying up late reading the first few chapters of his sci-fi novel. Soon, we were exchanging hundreds and hundreds of messages a day. My screen time said I was spending 5 hours on WhatsApp alone. Somehow, this connection that I was feeling with a man I had never met felt far more real than what was happening in the world, like pandemic and all this terrible news coming on the news, the TV. I was just wrapped up in this fantasy. He soon started calling me my love and saying things like, when this is over, I can't wait to kiss you, hold your hand. We're going to be gross and annoying and take tons of pictures together. And I believed him. Then, just a month in, so literally just a few weeks after that first swipe right, his messages started shifting. Just a little bit at first, a different tone, fewer emojis, less warmth, and then one afternoon he texted, I'm sorry if I've been offish lately. I really enjoy talking to you and I care about you a lot. I just don't know if we got ahead of ourselves. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. I couldn't breathe. You are listening to My Rejection Story, hosted by Alice Draper. That's what it felt like. Clearly I could, because I'm still here standing. It felt like someone had knocked the air out of me. I was winded physically, and this was so many years ago, but I can step back into that feeling like it was yesterday. Like, whoa, blindsided, knocked, like all the air knocked out of me. I did not see this coming. This rejection messed me up. As I started, it took me over a year to get over this rejection. And it was someone I'd never met. I'd just been texting to for a few weeks. I was so confused. Rejection is not something that happens intellectually at first. It actually happens in our body. We feel rejection sooner than we really intellectualize what's happening. And the science behind it explains quite a lot. So today, in this episode, I want to talk about what rejection actually does to a person, physically, emotionally, and neurologically. There is a reason why some of us feel more intensely than other people. And you also can start building your rejection resilience, even if you've spent your whole life thinking you're too sensitive or you're overreacting. So let's get into it. Why rejection hurts like physical pain. So rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, and there is neuroscience to this. In 2003, the researcher Naomi Eisenberger published one of the most famous studies on rejection. She placed people in an fMRI machine and had them play a virtual ball toss game. Halfway through the game, the other players stopped throwing the ball to them. There was instant exclusion. So imagine you're playing this game and then all of a sudden your virtual people are no longer engaging with you. So what happened? The part of the brain that lit up, which is the anterior cingulate cortex, is the same region that's activated when you experience physical pain. Later studies by Lieberman and Eisenberger, which were from 2004, and Cross in 2011, confirmed that social pain and physical pain share a neural alarm system, which is centered in the anterior cingulate cortex and in the anterior insula. So in that moment where Max, my Tinder match, said to me, "We got ahead of ourselves," and my whole body collapsed, as well, that's what it felt like. It was not me being dramatic. It was my neural pain system firing up as if I'd been physically hurt. So it's interesting, right? Because I think that we can invalidate those feelings we experience around rejection so much. Like, why am I reacting this way? But we wouldn't do that if you got stabbed. Like, imagine you're walking down the street and someone stabs and you're just keel over in pain. Like, oh my God, this is so painful. That's a very normal, expected reaction. Yet there's so much shame, I think, societally and within ourselves to have a similar reaction to rejection. So I want to talk a little bit about why rejection makes us feel so obsessed, foggy, and out of control. So that's the after. That's the part after you've been rejected and maybe you can't eat, you can't sleep, you can't stop spiraling. This is what I went through when I had that rejection from this Max person. I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm probably going to lose so much weight because I couldn't eat a thing. Like, just getting like a mouthful of food was an extreme sport. I just didn't feel like it could go down. And I'm sure you're familiar with that feeling. You don't feel like you can settle. I was staying up all night, stalking his Twitter account, being like, some cryptic tweet here is going to explain why he rejected me and what happened. I thought that the answers would be in reading Reddit threads and going down internet spirals. So this is backed by research. Research shows that rejection impairs cognitive function. So a study from 2002 by Baumeister showed that social exclusion reduces self-regulation and intelligent thought. Your brain prioritizes emotional survival over executive functioning. And then acute social stress also lowers your ability to plan, reason, and regulate emotions. A meta-analysis by Shields et al. From 2016 found that stress disrupts the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that is responsible for planning and logic. So that explains the can't work, can't focus, can't sleep, thinks that social media is oxygen and stalking their social media is going to make me feel better, searching for meaning in those cryptic tweets. And I think it's really helpful knowing the science, at least for me. It helps with the shame. I remember the first heartbreak I ever went through. I posted a sticky note above my desk. This was back in university, explaining what was actually happening neurologically with me because it helped me, I don't know, just realize okay, there's a science to this. It's not me going crazy. I'm not losing my mind. Scientifically, something is happening to me because my heart's been broken. Then there is the dopamine loop. So, in my case, getting attached to someone I'd never met. I was attached to, in my case, the projection of this person rather than the actual person because I'd never met them. I'd been texting this person intensely for weeks, and it was isolation, the pandemic. It was a really scary, horrible time. I was also coming to terms with the fact that my dad had dementia. And then my brain was just getting flooded with dopamine. Here is Prince Charming, everything I've ever dreamt of, progressive, smart. We're just playing this fantasy game. We were doing this future forward projection of what life is going to be like going forward. And I was just imagining this amazing future. And I had to learn the hard way, the dangers of projection when you don't know someone. And a great piece of advice that I got from Guy Winch, who I interviewed on this podcast, How to Heal a Broken Heart, which is very apt for the example I'm using today. So I recommend checking that episode out. But his advice was that you should only future forward or future project as far as you've known the person. So if you guys have been together for one day, plan your next dates, you're going to meet up one day ahead, or one date ahead. If you have known the person for 1 week, plan 1 week in advance. If you've known the person for 1 month, you can plan a month in the future. If you've known them for a year, you can plan a year in the future. If you've known them for 10 years, you can plan for 10 years in the future. And I just think it's such great advice because it's not like you're saying, oh, I won't plan the future at all, which is something I wanted to do after this experience. You're just keeping it anchored in like, how much do I know and trust you? How much have you shown me that I can like really like trust you to go there, let my mind go there? So Helen Fisher did some research in 2010 on romantic attraction, which shows that early romantic interest activates the reward systems in ways similar to addiction. And I think that I was addicted. Like, I was like one of those rats in the labs that was given cocaine, and I think it's cocaine. And then the cocaine's taken away, and then you're just like obsessively sucking the water because it was like cocaine laced water and hoping that there's going to be cocaine. And I felt like that. Like it was just like I'd become so dependent on this dopamine in the matter of weeks. And then it was just straight cold withdrawal. And part of, the problem with my situation was that I didn't know this person's flaws. I didn't know their bad habits. I didn't know the annoying quirks. I was really grieving a fantasy in my head. So I want to talk about how rejection affects identity and self-worth. Because rejection doesn't just hurt, it can destabilize our sense of belonging. And that is very much rooted in, survival instinct. Survival instincts is acceptance. And we want to be accepted by our wider tribe. So any kind of rejection is threatening and hurtful. But I think romantic rejections are a certain kind of hurtful because there's that survival instinct to partner up, mate, and keep the species moving. Like that's just biologically wired. Even if we logically, rationally don't want that. Like, I'm happy, people who maybe feel happy being single or happy having no children. There is probably still this biological underpinnings that can make a romantic rejection hurt that more because it's like the opposite of what you're biologically primed to do. So, a lot of psychological research shows that rejection threatens our self esteem, our sense of meaning, our sense of control, our connection to others. And this is why even small rejections can feel existential, but also why romantic rejections feel groundbreakingly awful. And in the case with this Max person, I remember thinking like, there's got to be something wrong with me. And I like went back to every other rejection I'd experienced. And I just thought like something is completely like broken with me. I clearly am the problem here. I need to, not need to, but it's like I'm just not someone that people see as relationship worthy. That's the kind of narrative I had, and it really destabilized my sense of self and confidence for quite a while. So, of course, I want to validate just how hard rejection is, and that's really why I want to explore all of this in so much depth. But I also want to talk about how to build rejection resilience because I do think that it's something that we can build and harness within ourselves. I think that not building rejection resilience can lead into some pretty toxic spaces. There are people who choose not to trust others, not to build connections, because they're so fearful of that rejection again. And I just, personally, of course, I don't think that's the way forward. So here are some ways that you can build rejection resilience. One is obviously self compassion. It is one of the most robust mechanisms against behaviors. I'll link those studies behind, in the scripts. Something that I think is really, really helpful for self compassion is to imagine that this is happening to a younger relative that you really care about, or a younger person. So, maybe you have a niece or nephew, or maybe you have a little cousin, or maybe you have a child yourself. Imagine this exact same situation is happening to them. So this thing that you're judging yourself for, maybe it's a romantic rejection, maybe you got fired from work and it's making you feel really, really awful about yourself. Maybe your business is not moving forward in the way you hoped it would be, and your confidence is really low. Now imagine that situation is being told to you by this young person who you really care for. How would you respond to that versus how you were responding to yourself? Because I do imagine it would be quite different. There'd be less judgments, less shame, way more compassion, way more understanding, way far more nuanced perspective on the whole situation. You would be seeing the big picture, how, there's all these other actors at play, and it's not, a sign of their self-worth or their competency that the situation has happened. So doing that can help, I think, with the self-compassion piece, because I do know it's way easier said than done. Then cognitive reappraisal. So that's the skill of reframing meaning. Major studies that I'll link in the show notes show that reappraisal reduces our stress, builds long-term resilience, and it creates emotional flexibility. So that's finding that reframe that feels believable to you. In the case of heartbreak, you could say, like, this is not a reflection of whether I'm a desirable partner. It's likely more of a reflection of this person's self-awareness or this person's coping mechanisms. Doing all of that, like, kind of what else could be happening. And I think, or at least this is what has helped me. I think it can, just really anchoring yourself in that reframe. Or, like, I got hurt because I care. I got hurt because I opened myself up. I got hurt because I trusted. Those are beautiful qualities. If I didn't have those qualities, I would not be capable of loving. Then tiny exposure to rejection. So the avoidance does keep the threat system active. I'd say expose yourself to those micro rejections and do it in a safe space. Make sure you have community around. My closing really is that when I look back now, and it is like almost 5 years on, over 5 years, I think, I am not embarrassed that it took me over a year to get over someone I never met, even though I was so embarrassed at the time. I was grieving a fantasy. I was grieving possibility. I was grieving the version of myself that felt chosen. And this fantasy of this life I was going to build with really a person that probably didn't exist was really just in my fantasy. Understanding the science, the pain circuitry, the dopamine loops, the projections, the uncertainty, helped me stop asking myself, why am I so dramatic? And start asking, how can I support myself better? So if you are in that rejection right now, whether it's a breakup, a dating disappointment, friendship rejection, job gone wrong, business gone wrong, remember that you're not overreacting. You are not broken. You're human, and humans are wired for belonging. When belonging is threatened, it hurts. It's okay. You're allowed to feel that hurt, but you can build resilience. You can regulate your nervous system, and you can rewrite those patterns. I also recommend maybe engaging with some therapy resources if that is something you're thinking of. If it's a broken heart, I highly recommend listening to the episode with Guy Winch, How to Heal a Broken Heart. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this episode was helpful, and I hope to see you next week. This was My Rejection Story, hosted by me, Alice Draper.